We have Steve Emerson, Executive Director of the Investigative Project on Terrorism. We have Frank Gaffney, former Assistant Secretary of Defense under President Reagan. He's now President of the Center for Security Policy. We have Jena McNeil from the Heritage Foundation. Jena, let me begin with you. I believe you're an expert on Homeland Security. You follow the beat. I want to ask you about one of the details that our own Pete Williams talked about. There's a master database, but that's different from a watch list. And how did this guy get through? If he's on a master database, why didn't we pick it up? And maybe more so, why wasn't he on the watch list?
Well, you know, there are several databases that are available to DHS. But the bad thing is that not all of those databases are available to TSA, and not all of them can automatically ensure that a person is going to be screened by TSA security. You know, we need to better connect the dots, and it seems to me that DHS has a problem here where, you know, we have a terrorist screening list that doesn't accurately reflect the risk that we face.
So how do you fix that? I mean, to me, that seems eminently fixable, right? I mean, we knew this guy, we knew his father blew the whistle on him, we knew he's shown up on some list. The British people are saying, the British guys, what is this, Alan Johnson of Scotland Yard says he never would have gotten into Britain because he was on their list. Isn't this something that is eminently fixable, Jena?
It absolutely is, and I think this demonstrates why that we have to stop terrorists before they ever get to an airport. You know, we have to have information sharing. We have to work with our international partners, and we have to help to stop terrorist sanctuaries overseas. By doing it before they ever get to the airport, we're not too late, and we can stop them before they even get to that security screening line.
All right, Steve Emerson, I want you to comment on what Jena just said. Can we, in fact, stop them? And, Steve, look, you and I have talked about this for years. I still do not understand why we don't have some kind of intelligent, however sensitive, profiling system in place, because the rest of Americans who fly in airplanes are going to pay the penalty for this crazy terrorist stuff, which is exactly what terror is all about, and it burns my butt, Steve Emerson. When are we going to take some actions here?
Well, we'll probably take some actions after a successful terrorist attack kills 300 Americans, like we took after 9/11. The reality is, and you and I have discussed this, as you just pointed out, that we have not taken intelligence decisions that is factor in whether somebody is a believer in radical Islam as a factor in terms of secondary inspection. If we get intelligence, as we did clearly with the case of the father coming to the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria saying his son was a member of a radical Islamic group, that intelligence should have been acted upon. Why didn't we act on it? Why did the Brits act on their intelligence that they received and deny him a visa? Well, we didn't.
So what's the answer to that? That's a great question. I asked Pete Williams that question. I asked Jen, what's the answer to that?
I think it's political correctness. It's the same reason why the Fort Hood shooter, Major Hassan, was not stopped before he shot 13 people to death, when people clearly were warning behind the scenes that he was a radical Islamic believer. No one wanted to be accused of being a racial profilist. So I think that political correctness inhibited any type of further action against the Fort Hood shooter. Remember that we face a broad variety of threats, from homegrown Islamic jihadists to those who come into the United States. So just stopping those that come into the United States won't stop the threats like the Fort Hood shooter. So you and I have talked about this political correctness that inhibits.
Yes, I just think whatever we're going to call it, Steve, I think there has to be some kind of profiling system. I'm sorry that is my view. Frank Gaffney, welcome back to the show. Frank, does the White House now understand there is an ongoing war on terror? They have avoided this phrase for the first year of their administration. Is this a wake-up call, Frank? Do they get it? And are they coming from Yemen even more?
I don't know, Larry. The president did use the term terrorist attack in his remarks today. He also said, by the way, something interesting. He said, we're going to do everything we can to keep America safe. And that follows on the heels of Janet Napolitano, something she didn't correct today, by the way, but that is very worrying to me, which was her statement yesterday that there's no indication that that this fellow is connected to any other terrorist activity. I beg to differ, and I think that Steve and your other guests have made this point, but let me put it more sharply. what we are up against, what this guy was connected to, what in fact every single one of the people involved in the other now 13 or 14 different efforts to attack people inside America have in common is an attachment, an adherence to what authoritative Islam, not some radical fringe, but authoritative Islam calls Sharia. And you're absolutely right, Larry. If we're not profiling, if we're not looking for that as a differentiator, not all Muslims do adhere to this. Those that don't are not the problem. Those that do are, and we've got to keep those guys out of airports and off planes, and for that matter, out of our government, and for that matter, you might even say out of the political influence operations that are the prominent face of so-called Muslim America in this country today. They're Muslim brothers, by and large, and they adhere to Sharia. They're part of the problem.
I want to globalize this, though. It's very important. There's this incredibly scary and threatening headline today that there are 25 more coming. These are British-born Muslims who became fanatics, and they're training in Yemen. Those are the news reports. It may not be correct, but those news reports are proliferating, and that's as much as I know. Now, Frank, there are also reports that we have been bombing Yemen. Now, I want you, Senator Lieberman says we must take preemptive action against Yemen and presumably these camps. What can you tell us? Have we been bombing? Are those bombs affecting? I mean, apparently one of the al-Qaeda leaders was killed. That's just a news report. Do you buy it? And what else? Is Lieberman right that we should attack Yemen?
Well, look, Larry, the point I'm making about Sharia is whether it's in Yemen or whether it's in Afghanistan or whether it's in Iraq or Iran or Saudi Arabia or a whole host of other places around the world, you have these folks incubating, and that includes the United States of America. One of the things you ought to add to your litany of concerns about Yemen, by the way, is the president's decision to send people from Guantanamo Bay back to Yemen.
Right. Oh my
There's a release that's already underway. There's more in prospect. We've got to be dealing with this thing as a truly global problem unless and until we're clear the nature of the enemy, what is animating them, and what it's going to take to stop them in Yemen and in these other locations. I think we're not going to have a prayer of defeating them, let alone discouraging them from perpetrating the kinds of attacks that we narrowly averted over the weekend.
Now, I'd hold your breath. I guess we've got some pictures of this terrorist underwear. I guess that's been reporting. It's coming out of ABC News. I think we're going to put that on the screen. There you go, the underwear bomb, we're calling it. And I will credit our colleagues over at ABC News. Jena, why didn't the metal detectors and all the rigmarole that we all have to go through, and I
stop Grandma from bringing in her 5-ounce bottle of liquid, but we can't just rely on putting a bunch of screening measures in place in order to stop terrorists in their tracks. And I think that's the important thing here is that, those are important, and we need to have an airport screening system in place, but to rely on that as our, counterterrorism effort just is ridiculous. See, that's why we have to start at the beginning. We have to start at the roots. We have to, Obama needs to start, putting pressure on Congress to get the Patriot Act through. There's a lot of things right now that he's not focusing on as far as, where he could actually play a big role.
What do we need on the Patriot Act, Jen? I don't mean to interrupt you, but let me follow that point before we lose it. You're talking about the surveillance procedures in the Patriot Act. What are you talking about specifically?
The sunset provisions. You have the lone wolf provision. You have the roving wire, roving surveillance provisions. You have the business records provisions. All of these help us keep one step ahead of the terrorist. And you know what? President Obama let Congress just simply put in an extension in instead of actually going to Congress and saying we need this and we need this to stop these kind of terrorist acts.
Do we have machinery, technological updated machinery from L3 and whomever that can do the proper screening, Jena?
Well, there's all kinds of machinery out there, and, of course we could, but, it's never going to be 100% in a way that protects privacy and civil liberties. There is technology out there, but I think that's why you have to have screening plus the behind-the-scenes, left-of-boom kind of stuff.
Yeah, I tell you, behind the scenes, watch list, whatever, it's got to be some kind of profiling. Steve Emerson, let me come back to this most disturbing part, as if this news weren't bad enough, Steve Emerson. What do you make, and I want to get Frank back in on this, this 25 more coming from Yemen. I mean, I've always been a believer in this game, going back all these years since 9/11, that where there's smoke, there's fire. Where these reports, they're coming out of London newspapers, there's something to them. 25 coming out of Yemen, Steve Emerson. It is a chilling thought.
Whether it's 25 or 12 or 15 or 100, you can be sure, Larry, that they are training young Western Muslims, either from the United States, from Britain, or Nigeria. Those that volunteer, those that are recruited and become radicalized, whatever, into becoming suicide bombers and to trying to penetrate the United States by acts of would-be terrorist efforts, like they tried on, the Nigerian young man tried on Christmas Day, Larry.
Do we have any intelligence assets inside Yemen? Do we have CIA people or whomever? Do we have assets inside Yemen? What are we doing? There's talk that we've actually put special forces in Yemen, and as I said earlier, and Frank, I want you in on this too, but Steve, you first. We are bombing Yemen. Is that true? Are we bombing Yemen? Can someone clarify that for me?
Yes, there are strategic bombing raids against al-Qaeda targets in Yemen, and carried out either by the Predator, by the United States, or by Yemen authorities with U.S. intelligence. But, you know, Larry, that's not good enough. Because, look, there's no doubt that Yemen, as a uncontrolled, decentralized government with a failed nation state, which is basically al-Qaeda dominated now, poses a major threat because it's a haven for al-Qaeda terrorists. But as Frank pointed out, you have believers in Sharia in Fort Hood and in Maryland that carry out terrorist attacks, and using the Predator is not an effective tool there. We've got to acknowledge, as you've said before, that some type of racial profiling is warranted right now, and taking into account sensitive intelligence that would activate further investigations when we find out that somebody is a believer in radical Islam, period. That would basically wipe out the potential pool of terrorists from coming in.
You would think they should be stopped right there. Frank Gaffney, let me just ask you this. I'm going to switch gears, Frank, but I think it's germane. Reformist, pro-democracy people are marching again in Iran. The phony, rigged election issue will not go away, Frank. It's a little bit different than this, but it may be related to this. Sure, it's in the same region. Frank, I'm going to give you what's your last thought on this? What's going on in Iran?
I have to say, we're not talking about racial anything. We're talking about people who adhere to a program. It's not even a religion. It's a ideological program they call Sharia. And by the way, the government in Iran, Larry, that's the connective tissue here, embraces it, espouses it, and is trying to be part of this worldwide program to impose it on the rest of us. The Shia of Iran, the Islamo-fascist, if you will, the mullahocracy there has its differences from others who are also trying to impose Sharia of the Sunni strain, but they'll sort that out after they destroy us. Our natural allies, you understood this very well from the beginning, Larry, are the people of Iran who are trying to overthrow this regime. It is a scandal that the President of the United States has not done more to try to help them succeed in that, and thereby, I believe, actually end the threat that we will otherwise certainly face, Frank, of a nuclear-armed Iran on the march.
Listen to me, buddy. Listen to me. We've had now, according to news reports, 10 or 12 people killed in Iran. They are demonstrating for freedom and democracy and against the mullahs and against the theology. They're also demonstrating against the military state, Frank. It is a military state in Iran. It's not some just bearded clerics, for God's sakes. It's a military state. Why hasn't the president said anything about the 10 to a dozen people who have been killed, one of whom was some kind of near cousin to one of the guys that ran for president? Where is this? Why aren't we backing the good guys in this?
He said something about it today as sort of a throwaway line at the tail end of this speech. But the truth of the matter is, Larry, we should be doing everything possible. This is a moment where you and I worked with Ronald Reagan to destroy another totalitarian ideology that was repressing its own people and seeking to dominate the rest of us. The same sorts of techniques that Ronald Reagan, my old boss Scoop Jackson, used to use against the Soviets need to be applied now. It is, as I say, a scandal that President Obama is not doing those things, and it is part of the larger failure to recognize the threat, characterize it properly, and then do as he's promising to do, everything he can to protect the American people.
I'll tell you, my friend,
Iran is part of that.
Talk about Scoot Jackson, who was a great man, a hawkish anti-communist, great American. He was a Democrat. Joe Lieberman is a descendant of Scoot Jackson, and he may be the only guy or one of the few people that really gets the threat here in Iran, in Afghanistan, and now in Yemen. Lieberman says we need to take preemptive action in Yemen. Well, I hope somebody in the National Security Council is figuring that out. I got to get out of here. Thanks for everything, Steve Emerson, Frank Gaffney, Jena, Baker, McNeil. What a story, I'll tell you. Coming up.